Washington State Republican Party Chairman Jim Walsh here at the office in Bellevue for our weekly Chairman's Update. Uh, I'll start by saying the legislative session in Olympia did end on time Sunday. In my last update, which was done just a few days before that, I talked about some of what was happening and what was likely to happen, and pretty much it happened like I said it was going to. I will talk more about the effects of the legislative session next week. Certainly, the controversial operating budget passed, and 5 or 6 very controversial major tax increases passed. We'll talk about those more in detail. We've already talked about them some before, but right now, for this week's update, I want to talk about breaking news that's just happened in the last couple of days. As you probably have read or heard, the U.S. Justice Department, working with the United States Federal Education Department, Department of Education, has initiated an investigation of Washington State's Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction for allegedly illegal behavior, violation of federal law that's gone on at the OSPI. And of course, the elected state superintendent of schools who heads up OSPI is Mr. Chris Reykdal, a controversial figure in Washington politics who's become one of the most radical leftists in our state government. Let me read you a little bit of the announcement made jointly between the Federal Department of Education and the Department of Justice. It talks about why this investigation started. It says, in part, earlier this month, the Department of Education's Office of the General Counsel sent a letter to the State Administrative Tribunal wherein OSPI is threatening the La Center School District with state funding termination over La Center's unwillingness to adopt policies that potentially violate federal laws. For example, in February, OSPI mandated that La Center, quote, not proactively share information about any student's gender identity without the student's consent, unquote. This may violate parents' rights under FERPA, that's federal law, to inspect their child's school records. OSPI also directed La Center to train school personnel on the use of a screen tool designed to, quote, eliminate bias related to gender identity, unquote. In instructional materials, possibly violating PPRA's provisions, that's another federal law, for educational agencies to consult parents while adopting policies which address the protection of student privacy. This is serious stuff, and it's something we've been talking about in Washington politics now for several years. A number of state laws and even more state bureaucratic edicts and rules violate federal law. And this investigation, it really opens up a whole bunch of issues about how Washington's preening and sanctimonious leftist politicians have been making a point of passing law and advocating policy that isn't law that breaks federal law. So this was bound to happen, and now it's coming to roost. Recently, in some media interviews and moments, this Mr. Reykdal, the leftist school superintendent, has played the victim and have said, poor him, he's being picked on by the mean feds. And he's also punted. He's said that it's not really Reykdal that's going to handle this matter. It's the state attorney general, Mr. Nick Brown, who's really in charge of handling this. No one's asked Nick Brown what he thought of that, by the way. Brown has some of his own problems. Similarly, Brown has been advocating for the flagrant disregard of federal immigration law. Right now, that's not led to federal action as the education K-12 stuff has, but is likely to. Uh, and uh, and this investigation by the Department of Education federal and the Department of Justice federal also puts some pressure on our governor, Mr. Ferguson, who has sitting on his desk House Bill 1296, which would gut the state's Parents' Bill of Rights and do some other bad things too. It empowers OSPI, the school superintendent's office, to withhold operating money from school districts if they disobey the bureaucrats at the state level. This is all questionable legally. It's questionable constitutionally, and that's the gist of the federal investigation. So the governor now, with this constitutionally and legally dubious gutting of the Washington Parents' Bill of Rights sitting on his desk, has to wonder how much he wants to get messed up in all of this. He could veto House Bill 1296. That'd be the strongest and boldest thing for him to do. He may not be that strong or that bold. He could also just ignore it and not sign it into law. And following Washington law and tradition, it would become law later, even without his signature. That's kind of the easy way out, and maybe the path that the governor chooses. But this is an opportunity for the governor to act with boldness and with strength and defend parents' rights and avert these investigations and potential lawsuits and other legal actions by the federal government against our lawless state bureaucrats here in Washington. This is a reckoning. It's been a long time in coming, but some of us who've actually read the Constitution, both state and local, and abide by those documents, have long predicted this was going to happen. We can't have these, really they act like kind of like spoiled teenagers. We can't have these state level bureaucrats and some state level elected officials flagrantly disregarding the federal Constitution and federal law and pay no price ever for it. This is not just a Republican Democrat thing. Although Republicans do tend to be on the side of the Constitution and lawful order in these matters, this is not a Republican and Democrat thing. It's a common sense thing. It's a lawful government thing. It's a accountable government thing. And I think it's a good thing ultimately for some of the bad things that have been happening here in Washington. The actions by the Federal Department of Education and the Federal Department of Justice will help us here in Washington fix what's broken in our beautiful state. This investigation by the feds, it's just the first step. It's not the last word on any of this. As I've said, it's starting with K-12 school policy, but this line of inquiry, this line of investigation could move into immigration matters, where Washington has acted lawlessly about immigration law, federal immigration law. It could translate into some of these horrible things we're seeing in our budgets, in our taxes here in Washington state. There are constitutional and legal questions around those. The one-party dominance of Washington state politics for so long has led, as you know, to what I call decadence. It's not really corruption, but it's a kind of institutional weakness that we're seeing, I believe, in its last stages here. There will be accounting. There will be a reckoning. It'll happen in part because the federal government is helping make it happen, but ultimately, it comes down to you and me living here in our Washington to make sure we fix what's broken and hold the lawless accountable for their bad actions. Next week is filing week to run for public office in this year, 2025's local elections. In our odd-numbered years in Washington State, we do our local elections, school boards predominantly, but also city councils, some county races, very local elections in our odd-numbered years. That's this year. The state party is going to once again support good, conservative school board candidates all around Washington. And where we can, we will support local candidates to city councils and mayor races. But our real focus is going to be on the school boards, where we think there is so much to be fixed. And this plays right back again into the bad things that the school superintendent has done that has led to this federal investigation. But if you know anyone who might run for office, next week is the time to file, to run for local city, county offices, and especially file to run for school board races. If you know anyone, a parent, a grandparent, someone who served in the military, anyone with a good organizational knowledge of how our schools should operate, focusing on reading, writing, math, and the hard sciences, encourage them to file to run for school board next week. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll talk again about some of the filings that have taken place. Make sure you're part of that, and we will talk about the ongoing drama out of Olympia with our budgets and our taxes here in Washington State. Until then, stay strong and be well.